Hello and welcome to Better Under Pressure. I'm Sara, Milne, author of The Shed Method and founder of Coaching Impact. And in this podcast, I talk to leaders from all walks of life about being better under pressure and using pressure for better. I want to explore how we handle pressure in a world that is becoming more and more complex, the impact that pressure has on our ability to perform at our best, and what we do to be better under pressure.
When you share a bit more of you, it just gives people permission to do the same, particularly once you're a senior leader in an organization, because people are people at the end of the day, Sara. And the more you allow people to bring that whole self into work, it allows you to understand better what people are going through and then adapt. And that builds trust and allows you to also kind of step into high performance in a trusted way. It's a balance, but I feel the corporate world is changing significantly in this regard. And I think we as leaders need to lead by example.
Today, I'm talking to Sigga Sigurdardottir, who's been a pioneer in customer-led digital transformation and innovation throughout the global financial services industry for 20 years. She champions partnering with startups, fintechs, and digital players worldwide to deliver outstanding experiences for consumers. She spent 14 years leading digital transformation and change for American Express, working in 4 different continents. She then spent 4 years as Santander UK's Chief Customer and Innovation Officer, moving the organisation to greater customer focus and innovative delivery methods. That was followed by 3 years as Chief Customer Officer at Tesco Bank, improving the NPS significantly and driving profitable growth of the lending business. She has just joined Experian as MD of the consumer business for the UK. Sigga sits on the Women in Fintech Power List on the board of both Auto Trader Group plc and fintech Ventures. Known for her passion for innovative leadership and for diversity and inclusion, Sigga's been named in Marketing Week's Top 50 Customer Experience Professionals, recognised by Empower as a top ethnic minority advocate, and acknowledged by the FT and her Rowe as a champion for women in business. In our conversation today, Sigga shares when her tendency to shield others from pressure became a problem, why she chose to step away from her job for 6 months, and the impact of what she wrote on a piece of paper back in her 20s. Sigga, thank you so much for joining me on Better Under Pressure.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Sara. I'm really delighted to be here.
Well, I'm very excited that you're here, to be honest. And Sigga, do you remember when you first felt pressure?
Look, I think from an early age, I probably felt pressure, and it was very self-inflicted. I grew up in a very loving family. My parents actually never put any pressure on me. There was never, you have to kind of get to a certain grade or perform in this certain way. And I grew up in my parents are very, very young parents. So I guess I was, and my siblings are, my sister is a year younger and my brother is a year and a half older. So we're very close in age. And I think there's a bit of that competition and in me and myself that kind of really need to perform. So I guess where I felt pressure was just through school in terms of exams. I played the violin and performing has always been a bit of a pressure point for me. So playing the violin in a concert, I remember feeling those kind of tingly feelings, when you go, right before you go on stage and you perform. So that's probably there isn't that particular time, but I think from very early stage, I felt pressure.
But it also sounds like you recognized it and knew it was part of the deal of performance. That's what I'm hearing just from that example. Yes. It didn't seem like it fazed you that much when you were younger. Would that be right?
That's completely correct. I mean, when I was in school plays, and I had, I had to deliver my part. There was always that little bit of that kind of, pre-anxiety before going on stage. But I don't think it didn't create any kind of, sleepless nights at that age.
Do you know what, Sigga? I never knew you played the violin. That's I've known you for a while and worked with you for a while. I never knew you played the violin. That's fascinating. Brilliant. So has pressure always been a force for good for you in terms of sort of pushing you to something that you didn't feel you could achieve or not?
I think in the main, yes. I think kind of, and I actually firmly believe kind of pressure is a positive force for driving high performance, but you have to have the right conditions around you to turn that into positive energy. I think kind of throughout my career, I probably felt a couple of times where there was more of a kind of that negative energy around pressure that then created maybe not the conditions for success.
Okay, and when you recognize that it's negative, what happens to you? How do you recognize that it's turned from positive to something that's more debilitating?
Yeah, I can give an example. I mean, I had a couple of leaders that were very polar opposite that I worked for at the same time. And they had very polar opposite views of what success looked like. And aligning those views and feeling kind of being set up for success wasn't there. And what that did for me in that moment was a lot of self-doubt, a lot of like, I'm not sure I've got this under control, and probably, a few sleepless nights, to be honest, and then needing to take that step back and really think about, okay, how do I turn this into something that I can manage?
Yes. And when you're dealing with two bosses that are polar opposites, in hindsight, Sigga, let's just dive in here right now.
Yes.
What would be your key lessons from managing that? Because I think that can be, even if it's not two bosses, it can be two very different people or two different stakeholders that really matter to you and the success of your team. What would be your advice stepping away from it now, looking back on it?
A couple of things. I think, first of all, kind of have a conversation up front and just bring everyone together and just go like, look, here is what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm hearing. It's not working for me. And just kind of outlining that up front and being much more upfront and facing into it. The other thing that I did, which I think was not helpful, was I tended to shield my team from that because there was these kind of ongoing pressure points. And that was probably not helpful for the team either. I probably should have just kind of been much more open, had that conversation, and just brought that to a bear much earlier on.
Yeah. And by shielding them, what did you see happen?
I think there's a little bit of, it creates, the reason why I did it was, look, I need to just let them get on, not get them into the politics of what's going on here, and allow them to be at their best in terms of just delivering and removing barriers and focus on what matters from a business and customer perspective. But I think what it did, though, is it created a bit of lack of trust. They were not fully in the know, and that's not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you recognize pressure building for them then in a different way?
Exactly, because the direction wasn't as clear as it could have been, because the views that were coming through in terms of we need to do this, but then we need to do that, and so it was just stepping in and having that open and honest conversation and letting them be part of the solution, which I kind of is how I am generally in the way that I operate with my team.
For you, just in your own way that you managed yourself in that situation, when were you at your best with that pressure, and when did it really not feel like you could continue or at least be your best?
I think when I was at my best was I think just taking that step back and really taking care of myself as well, really, and I was working with you at the time, Sara, and it was really helpful in terms of thinking through the sleep, hydration, diet, exercise, like how do I just make sure that I'm focused on myself. And I think there's something for me. Look, I've had some life events that have created far greater pressure, which also helps you put things into perspective. So it's like, it's not life and death. It's just things that I need to work through. So it's kind of allowing myself to just not put it all on my shoulders and be able to, I'm a husband and an amazing kind of a force for good and throughout my kind of career and life, and he's been there for me in those moments. So I think just having that conversation and I guess just naturally a glass half full person, positive energy, just being able to laugh, did not take it too seriously. I think that just helped me kind of step into it and getting some good advice on, okay, how do I deal with this situation? Where it didn't kind of feel that good was maybe when I felt a bit out of control, like there wasn't, even though I felt I had alignment, the alignment wasn't there. And then it just showed up in, mainly in that kind of senior leadership meetings. And it just felt like I didn't have it fully under control, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And if we went into your conditions of success, I mean, you mentioned sort of the basic fuel things, but what would you say that you use on a regular basis, Sigga? And we'll get into, I mean, I know that you've had some very personal challenges, which I think would be helpful actually to share. But if you had to sort of almost put your money against one thing that actually you would hold on to in terms of a condition for success for you to be better under pressure, what would it be?
I think it's to do with this feeling being in control, and that is, and also like being in control, and that's just preparation, really understanding kind of having done the homework, really important. And then from a personal perspective, it's just taking time out, and that could be during the day, just go for a walk. And nature is really important to me, and I live in Maswell Hill, so being able to just take a walk around the woods gives me just that kind of, I guess, release. Breathing is really important, and just, I mean, and I, on a separate note, one of the kind of things that I've throughout my career I've had to kind of tackle is public speaking, and so thinking through, okay, what are the things that help me when I kind of go on stage in terms of public speaking, because it is always a bit of a tingle before, and how do I kind of manage through that, and it is just focusing on the mind, taking a power pose, and stepping into it.
Yeah. Can you think of any specific example where you really felt the pressure rise?
Yes, there's actually a great example, and I think it was the time when we were starting to work together, Sara. I had a major presentation at an event, which is the biggest fintech event in Europe, called Money 2020, and again, me needing to be feeling in control and being really prepared. I'd kind of prepped the presentation, and I was ready to go. The fly out in the evening, and presentation happening the following day, when I get called in by the CEO, and kind of with a view that we can't really be sharing some of the stuff at this point in time. Things have changed. Can't be sharing some of the detail that you've got in there. So it kind of really turned the presentation on its head. So I had to very quickly really think through, okay, how do I turn this around? I have to have the presentation delivered to the venue in like 3 or 4 hours. I'm about to get on a plane, and I need to be in control of like the delivery of it. So I was lucky enough to actually, have you there to kind of talk, and talk you through some of those things that mattered to me in that time, and just kind of the preparation of it, and then working with my kind of my team on rejigging that content in, like, it was very high pressure getting that together, and then sending that off, and then flying to Amsterdam, and then that whole evening prepping, practicing that content, that created nerves for me. But then the following day I'm on stage, and it went incredibly well. So I think that kind of pressure moment really, in the end, probably enabled me to deliver an even better presentation the following day, even though it wasn't ideal. That massive change in direction, and being able to turn that around so quickly was pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah, God, isn't that interesting? That's such a fantastic example of, for me anyway, pressure enabling you to be better. It felt deeply uncomfortable, and I remember just by chance we just happened to have a session and we hit that moment. But I think you're looking back on it. I mean, I can tell from the way that you're talking that it gave you a route of reassurance around what you're capable of, actually.
Exactly. And I think it's an important point. It's like that. Sometimes you think that this is just unachievable, I can't do it, but then you just step into it, and that actually that raises performance significantly.
Yes, just step into it. Whilst these moments of unexpected or added pressure on a situation that already feels high stakes can feel unachievable, just stepping into it, as Sigga puts it, is a choice. And, as she observes, can actually surprise us and raise our performance. It's a choice to step in, and whilst it's not always easy to do that, the more we practice that choice, the better it is. the more opportunity we have to learn about ourselves, the agency we have, and what's possible. I recently came across the natural principle of stress wood in trees. Wild trees develop what the scientists call stress wood, which, put simply, is a tree's reaction to wind. Wind causes the branches to sway and move, which of course places stress on the load-bearing parts of the tree. To compensate, trees instinctively develop an extra layer, stress wood, making the tree stronger to survive in the wild winds. God, nature's so clever. Without the wind, trees don't develop this stress wood and as a result can collapse under their own weight. Some stress on the tree is necessary to keep it healthy and growing. The same is true of humans' relationship with pressure. If we can reframe unexpected pressures as opportunities to grow our stress wood, it will ultimately free us to flex more with ease under the strain, make us even better as a result. How different that would feel. How has your personal life upped the ante for you in terms of remaining strong? Because, you know, you're in a different job now, and we can talk about that in a minute. But can you just tell us about the journey of when you were in a very senior position, your personal life became incredibly challenging for you, and what you did, Sigga?
Yeah, this is very recent, but I'm also going to tell you another story of what happened kind of earlier in my career that's been like also an anchor point for me. But this last year, so 2022, was an incredibly challenging year for my husband and I. We have two children, Alexander and Diana, and our son Alexander was suffering quite significantly from mental health issues, which led him to go missing for days. And it was, it went on for 2 or 3 months. At that time, I was the chief customer officer at Tesco Bank, a really senior position within the bank. We were going through a massive transformation of the business. I was really enjoying that role, but I felt in that moment quite kind of, I guess, helpless to a degree. It's like I cannot focus on my job effectively while this is going on in my personal life. So I decided in the end, and my husband and I took that decision together, it would be good for me just to step away and for us to really be able to focus on our son's well-being, and actually our daughter's well-being as well, who, you know, she's a year younger, and it takes toll on, and took a toll on her as well. So I stepped away from my role for over 6 months just to focus on him. And I'm glad to say that what we did in the end is we took him back to Iceland, where he is now, and he is back at school. My husband's spending kind of significant amount of time with him there, while I'm here in London with our daughter. So it's not been without sacrifices, figuring out what are the conditions for success for us as a family. But that's essentially kind of what I've done and worked through that. And that builds resilience. That builds the belief that, you know, you're stronger than you think.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess another story tied to kind of more personal kind of growth was and resilience was in my 20s. I started having seizures. I was in a quite a senior position actually as a head of marketing for one of the publishing houses in Iceland at the time, and I started having seizures, and it transpired that I had some sort of a malfunction. I don't even know the English word for it in my brain, which needed an operation. Otherwise, it could cause hemorrhage. And so I went on a number of actually had to go to Sweden for that to be fixed because Iceland didn't have the technology at the time. So I went on a number of trips to Sweden. And I remember very clearly, this is like I'm in my mid to late 20s, sitting kind of in a hospital bed in Gothenburg in Sweden with my husband. Actually, he was my boyfriend at the time, was my husband now, just writing down, what do you want out of this life? Like, and it was such a pivotal moment in thinking kind of what matters to me. And we both kind of, you know, we wanted to kind of go and study abroad. We wanted to live in different countries, wanted to have children. And that's kind of, and it's interesting, I still have this piece of paper, and it, you know, not that I've been kind of every year thinking, okay, I need to tick things off, but it just helped kind of create that when you're in this situation with your health or with your family, that focuses your mind very clearly what matters.
Gosh, yes, I'm sure. God, and the fact that you've still got that piece of paper is
Yeah.
amazing. It must be so powerful to have that piece of paper.
Exactly. And I think that has given me kind of resilience in a way that you kind of, you things happen, but kind of in your career, but it's not a life and death situation, right?
No, and I love that idea that this sense of perspective. So you shared two very significant moments in your life, one very personal on your health, and then another very personal with your actual family and what's happening with your son. But what you're saying, which I think is really interesting, Sigga, is that when we've got these moments where resilience really has been stretched, when, perspective, it gives you perspective, actually, in terms of anything that you might be dealing with on a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis. Can you explain how you tap into that? I'm really intrigued, and in these conversations, becoming increasingly so, in terms of how do you tap into this sort of to me, it's a purpose energy. It's something that's actually given you a sense of wideness in perspective that allows you to be better in that moment. Can you sort of explain, and I know it's hard, but how do you do that? So in your job now, if you come across a crunchy moment or a moment that's slightly sort of, I don't know, a bit of pressure, how do you expand your perspective, Sigga, using these examples? What do you do?
I think first of all, I'm so lucky, and I was very, very careful in terms of where I went next. So I've just joined a company called Experian, which is just a wonderful organization, very, very strong on purpose. So I think that's number one, really, really kind of being in an organization where you feel you can succeed, high on culture, high on culture, and high on performance. And I think, a feeling that you can bring your whole self to work is really important to me. And then I am, and you know me well enough, I thrive on kind of delivering and transformation and putting the customer at the center of everything that we do. And I've got a wonderful role now leading the consumer business for Experian here in the UK. And I think the way I tap into that kind of personal purpose is essentially being vulnerable with my team in terms of really clear about what matters to me, but also tapping into that broader purpose of the business and what are we here to do ultimately, and how is that helping consumers at the end of the day, which really matters to me. So it's connecting essentially what matters to me to what matters to the organization, and setting that bar, because everyone wants to achieve, everyone wants to deliver, everyone wants to feel good about kind of being able to deliver at pace. And it's setting that kind of clear vision and mission, and then breaking that down into kind of what does it take to succeed, but then celebrating success, celebrating those kind of little milestones and where you're making that happen.
Yes. I'm curious about the word vulnerability and what it means to all of us in different situations. And I remember you actually writing a LinkedIn post explaining the situation that was going on with your family, particularly with your son, Sigga, and why you were stepping away from Tesco. And the extraordinary response you got to that showing of what was going on in your life. And I'm very intrigued with you specifically, actually, because I think there's something about the balance that you had that I've witnessed about this sort of vulnerability and what you're talking about in terms of high performance delivery and this sort of heady mixture of those two things. Has there been a moment where you have tested that and it's gone, what's the balance for you, and how do you test how vulnerability sits within an organization alongside performance and push, not pushing, but well, yes, potentially pushing others to be able to be their best.
Yeah. It's certainly been a journey for me as well. And I think kind of when you first step into the corporate world, you feel very much there's the corporate world, and there's the corporate personality, and then there is the kind of, how I'm at home with my family and my friends. Yeah. But I think I'm naturally quite an open personality and kind of upbeat personality. So I think I've been testing into that kind of along the way, because I've had these, as I said, life events that have triggered certain things. And what I felt throughout is when you share a bit more of you, it just gives people permission to do the same, particularly once you're a senior leader in an organization. And to your point, when I put out that, I was amazed, absolutely amazed by the response, both personal responses that I got, but also through LinkedIn, because people are people at the end of the day, Sara. And people are feeling different things or experiencing different things. And the more you allow people to bring that whole self into work, it allows you to understand better what people are going through and then adapt. And that also builds trust and allows you to also kind of step into high performance in a trusted way, if you like. So I think it is. It's definitely it's a balance, but I just feel the corporate world is changing significantly in this regard. And I think we as leaders need to lead by example. I think COVID has had a lot, we all of us had, our whole family in the meeting, in the meetings and stuff. And, I think people remember that one video that I think the BBC presented when the child went into that kind of meeting, and it was like panic that today that's just normal things that happen. So I think there's been a massive shift and change, and mental health. I mean, particularly the stuff that we've been going through with in our family is just such a big topic that we need to be willing to share and talk about, because it's a really important part of us as human beings.
Yeah. And now you've been how long into this new job?
I'm just 3 months in.
3 months.
Yeah.
What would you say have you taken in your fundamental toolkit for being better under pressure in this whole journey that you've gone through, Sigga, from your 20s all the way through up to where you are now, with your family split between Iceland and London? What would you say are your go-to absolute sort of practices in your toolkit to enable you to be better under pressure so that you have this experience in your new job?
I think just being in control, being in control, and that comes, I come back to preparation and really understanding, whether that is, for me now, it's really understanding the planning and where I need to show up at my best.
So just really on that point, sorry to interrupt you, but preparation, a lot of people talk about preparation, and a lot of people on this podcast have talked about the importance of preparation, and you have linked it to control, which I think is really interesting. How do you make sure that you get that condition for success so that you can prepare? What's your, do you have a formula? Do you have a way of actually making sure that you protect that ingredient for you?
So I think it is, yes, first of all, it's being properly selfish around where I need to be, kind of what are the critical impact opportunities that we have as a business coming up, and what are the things that where I need to really be, in my kind of, it's kind of like going into sports event, or like being performing, basically being really well rested, feeling in control of the topic or subject. And that is very much working with my team, because I'm still learning. I'm not, there's a lot for me still to learn. So it's just kind of tapping into my team and understanding what really matters and how we're going to do this together. And then just kind of more from a mental perspective, just being, as I say, well rested, in the right frame of mind ahead of those sessions or meetings.
Yeah. I want to pause here to capture a couple of things that Sigga mentioned that help her through moments of pressure. Be crystal clear about where you add the value and when you need to be your best. We can't be 100% at our best all the time. And the practice of identifying those particular moments that matter, whether it's over the course of a day or a week or a month, where we want to be 100%, critical opportunities where our impact needs to count and we can add the greatest value, can really help us manage our energy and allows us to turn up at our best when it matters most. Also, as Sigga says, reduce pressure on yourself by tapping into your team, their knowledge and their strengths. Sometimes we put far too much pressure on ourselves to know everything, but looking outwards to our team not only relieves the pressure on us, but also allows those team members to identify where they add the most value too. Well, I know I'm guilty of the urge to try and control everything, particularly when I feel under pressure, which drives my team to distraction. And when I notice myself getting involved in too many things, these 2 questions I've learned over time really help me. 1. What or who, Sara, needs you to be at your best this week? Secondly, when, Sara, is good enough actually good enough? And having been 3 months into your team, you mentioned just then understanding what matters to them. What have you done to make that fast track into understanding your team?
I think that comes just down to having kind of one-on-one conversations with them individually, but also bringing, I'm working very closely with them now and bringing together kind of our strategy and basically spending time together. We've had a couple, kind of full day sessions where we've gone through kind of both the history of kind of where are we at today, but then also crafting together the vision for the future and listening. It's a lot about listening. I don't have all the answers. They're incredibly capable, smart people. It's about them listening and tapping into that kind of joint learning that they've been on together as well.
Yeah. What's been the worst pressure that you have ever faced, Sigga?
Oh wow, that's a tough and it's not tough. I mean, the worst pressure was the pressure that we had last year with my son. It's like you cannot imagine the pain, the anxiety, the anguish, and you don't know where your son is for days.
I can imagine.
So that's for me and for us as a family was very, very difficult. But I'm very proud of my husband and I and the way that we've been able to tackle that. And that was literally, almost you have to break it down into like, how am I going to get through this morning? How am I going to get through this? What are the things that we can do in this horrible moment that kind of alleviates a bit of that pressure, but you got this complete anxiety going through your body at the time. It was just awful, but also shielding our family and Iceland a little bit from it. So that kind of, when do we tell them what? And like, it was just because you kind of have all the communication channels. You're trying to get hold of the police, you're trying to get hold of social services. And it was just, very, very difficult point in our life.
I can imagine. Well, I can't imagine actually. It must be. Oh, and also the support that you got from Tesco is really brilliant. Actually, I remember.
Yeah. They were excellent. They immediately just go off, take a month off, and then during that month they said like, look, I need more time off, and they were absolutely brilliant throughout. And I have to say, we are very lucky, my husband and I. We got an amazing extended family that's kind of behind. And so when you have that background, there's just so much more to rely on. Now the difficulty is they're all in Iceland. We were here, so that the fact that we've ended up taking him back home for a little bit is, I think, Ludwig has that support over there with the extended family that have been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, fabulous. Sigga, here's the question that I ask all guests. If you could have 2 things, if there was someone listening to this podcast who wanted to be better under pressure, and you had 2 pay forwards, what would they be?
Look, I think for me, there's something about just don't take yourself too seriously. Like there's something around it's gonna be okay, right? If I were to be able to talk to my younger self, it's just like, don't sweat it too much. And I felt that I probably stressed out too much in the kind of early days of my career over things that really don't matter at the end of the day. You're going to be okay. Just push ahead, have conviction, be brave, step into it.
Great.
And then the second thing is take care of yourself. Yeah. Really be selfish around making sure that you understand what are your conditions for success. How do you ensure that you can be at your best, whether that is, get the right amount of sleep, exercise, go for a walk, do a yoga class, whatever it is that kind of gives you that peace of mind and the ability to feel, I guess, in control.
Yeah. I really love that, Sigga. I think, as you know, it matters a lot to me and the people that I work with, but it's such an easy thing on some level to say, isn't it? You've got to look after your sleep, your hydration, but actually making sure what it is that actually fits for you and really honoring it and giving it that time or that space that it needs is so difficult and tricky sometimes with life. But it's knowing the one thing, I know for me it's sleep. It makes such a fundamental difference to me. And sometimes you have to compromise on the amount that you get because of other choices that you're making. But I think your point about just understanding what ingredient really, really matters to give you the fuel and looking after yourself, taking care of yourself, because we cannot be good in pressure if we haven't got the fuel in us.
Exactly. And I like, it doesn't have to be big things. It does, block a little bit of time during the day, go for a walk, just give yourself that kind of, and I find most of my kind of, I am a kind of, my brain goes 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I like just going for a walk, just slows that down a little bit, but gives you that clarity.
Yeah. And would it be fair, actually, in my sense of you, Sigga, is that when you are under pressure, you go faster.
Yes, absolutely.
And that, that I think is the journey you've also been experimenting with, is how do you interrupt your speed to get through things by taking a walk or by, giving yourself permission.
And reminding myself just to slow down from time to time, absolutely. And I think it's just inherent in me, like speed is something that just it's part of who I am. But when I feel the pressure, it is a good, like, high performance pressure. I want to go 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I think I speed up in the way that I talk, and so it's just working out and making sure that I can, again, I come back to control, feeling fully in control. But I'm back to your question, and kind of, I know you asked only for two things. I think laughter and just being able to just, don't take yourself too seriously, but also just sense of humor and laughter is so important, and being able to bring that to the workplace and into stressful situations is, I think, is important as well.
Yeah. Sigga, thank you so much. This has been so insightful, and it's so lovely to have you on. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sara. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Better Under Pressure with me, Sara Milne Rowe. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe and let us know what you found useful or what you'd like to know more about. Our aim is to share as many examples as possible of what people do to manage pressure for better. If you're interested in any of the practices mentioned, check out my book, The Shed Method. Alternatively, you can find us at Coaching Impact or me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Better Under Pressure was produced by the fab team at Smart Cookie Media. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.